Pat Brady's here. Pat's a picture of health, physically, mentally.
He just came from the gym, right?
Oof.
I just gave her my nice warm bed.
Yeah.
Going to the gym later.
All right, Pat, so let's dive in here. You hated the New York case against Trump, not in defense of Trump, just because it was a political stretch. It was a moving of, in a stretching of the statute and all of those things. How do you feel about the Georgia case before we get to Fani Willis's ridiculous personal life?
I think the Georgia case is a more solid case because it's actually based on what happened after the election, that they engaged in this elector scheme, that they tried to fix the election in their favor. So I think the facts are good there. That was a legitimate case, although it's too broad. And Fani Willis down there, so this is what she did. She's the DA down there, and she charged this huge, very complicated criminal enterprise case. You have to really be experienced federal or state prosecutor to try that kind of case. And she has some of that experience. I'm like, okay, good. She can actually try this case. What she does is she hires her boyfriend, who is
which everybody in the office knew, but it was not public knowledge.
Yeah, well, she hires her boyfriend to handle the case.
And he had no experience in this kind of law.
He's a divorce lawyer.
Yeah.
And she paid him $850,000 a year. And at the time this happened, I said to myself, if I was a judge, I would call her back and go, this case is dismissed. But what they've done is they're now trying to, the higher court is trying to rule whether or not she should be thrown off the case for her conduct. I think she should be disbarred for it. But that case is so tainted now, whatever the verdict is, in the political sense, it's going to have zero impact. It's a legit case, and people have already pled guilty to it and are going to cooperate against.
There's multiple defendants.
Yeah, there was 19, which is too many. But the bigger point is, and I think this is what gets lost, the state prosecutors typically don't do these kind of cases. It's a state prosecutor, like the state's attorney here, well, at least Kim Foxx, they used to prosecute crime here, but those are usually drugs and guns and murders and things like that. And the federal government handles these more complicated election-type cases. That's just the way it's always been.
As you go forward with this, you've also got the Florida documents case, which we'll get to in just a second. This does not excuse Trump from illegal behavior. There's two tracks here. Once the case is brought, you can hate the reason the case was brought, but once the case is brought, the prosecution of that case is supposed to go forward. The DA, Fani, has screwed the pooch here, that's a legal term, in a way that, as you said, completely weakens the impact of it. But again, I would ask you to consider, don't you think you ought to hold the president to higher standards in the case of Trump, because you probably shouldn't be breaking the law. All right, let's go to Florida, the data case.
Yes.
Or not the data case, the documents case.
Yeah, so that's down in Florida, and the judge that's handling it, Judge Cannon, she's a federal judge, and Donald Trump appointed her to that spot down in Florida, and this documents case was brought. If you read the case, it's pretty solid. The difference between what Biden and Pence and others did with documents is they chased Trump around for 6 months and said, can you please give us this stuff back? And he wouldn't. Then he lied about it, had others lie about it. So they did the raid and he got indicted. So the point is, though, this judge is, and there's an old saying in law, anything but the merits. And the Trump teams, I think very wisely, their strategy is to delay. So they keep filing motions to delay this. And the judge is playing ball with them. And she's slow walking on this. Now, that being said, I don't agree with what the left is saying either, that she's making these rulings and she's slowing down. No, this is a complicated case that involves national security documents that not many people can see. So these are the discovery process where you're exchanging information about the case takes a long time. So I've never tried one. Very few people have.
The whole argument on the left is she's completely biased because Trump picked her. Do you see evidence of that?
No, I don't. And nor did I see any evidence there was bias in the New York case. It's a ridiculous thing. The last thing a judge wants to do is get reversed.
Right.
But the one thing that Judge Cannon did this week, which is kind of a head scratcher, there's a motion to the defense filed to get rid of Jack Smith as a special prosecutor. Now, there's arguments on both sides of the propriety of the special prosecutor law, but the reality is it's been upheld all over the country for many, many times. But
against both parties, by the way.
Yes, but it's changed over the years. But yes, it's constitutional. It's completely fine. But she is allowing other people to come in and argue along with Team Trump, including former Attorney General Ed Meese and the former Attorney General Murkowski.
Okay, I didn't even know you could do this, and I'm sure it's happened. I don't know if it happens regularly, but explain what that means. So other people petition the court to say, I want to speak on behalf of the defense?
So remember that time when you got arrested and you and I went to court?
Yeah, I remember.
So it'd be like the judge saying, Steve, here are the charges against you. And then I stand up and go, hey, Steve's my buddy. I agree with what he's saying. I get to present my...
But you have to ask the court if I can come in, right?
But in this case, there's a thing, it's called amicus curiae briefs. They call them friends of the court briefs. They're typically in the Supreme Court where there's a big issue, say abortion or something like that. So you have all these groups filing amicus briefs on behalf of the issue that they believe
I know
in.
he's mispronounced it. I called it amicus. It's amicus.
I don't know.
I mean, you say potatoes as potato. It's
Yeah,
fine. Whatever you guys
Me in law school.
What's the one with the balls where you do the math?
It's amicus, Mr. Brady. I'm like, yeah, whatever.
The wood balls, is that an amicus? No, that's not. Okay, that's something else.
Anywho, the big difference is, though, she's actually letting these folks come in and argue instead of just the brief, which I've never seen. I don't think anybody has. And it's unusual, and then it plays into the theme or the theory that she's biased. I don't think she is, but that's... So no matter what goes on in these cases, one side sees it one way and one side sees it the other. And the reality is, I really don't believe the people that work for the FBI, the DEA, or work in the criminal justice system are all corrupt.
So both the cases, though, have been delayed. So they will not be tried prior to the election. And then after election, will they sort of go away or change focus?
Well,
like the one in with the 19 other people in Atlanta.
Yeah, Georgia won't go.
That's the Georgia one.
Yeah, that won't go. Okay, so soon the Supreme Court is going to rule on this claim that the former president's made that he has absolute immunity. His counsel said
Which
that
he does not.
He could have a Navy SEAL Team 6 kill one of his opponents because he's president. That case is in front of the Supreme Court. Now, that case is not as clear-cut as everybody thinks it is. It might get sent back for some further evidentiary findings by the trial judge, which will delay it further. Now, if they come back next Thursday and rule that Trump's claim is frivolous, that case, that's the January 6th case, could go as early as September.
And that is the only
Let me follow
case.
up one thing, though. This notion, first of all, that the president can pardon himself, that's not 100% clear. In fact, Richard Nixon, they wrote a big memo on it in 1974 when he was thinking about it, and his counsel said, we're not sure if we can do that. Secondly, when he becomes president, the president just can't go over to the Justice Department and say, hey, dismiss that case.
Yeah,
that's just not how it worked. He may try to do that. Nixon tried to do that. But I think we're going to have, on both issues, probably another constitutional crisis on the role of the president.
Yeah, and muddying the water like this for the public does exactly that. It muddies the water and people don't know what's going on, and it furthers them to take the sides because they go, it's easier if I just agree with the people that are yelling the loudest.
Yes.
The fact is, the January 6th case is about something that happened that the president had been proven, President Trump, sitting in president at the time, been proven to not take an action once the insurrection was underway to protect his own vice president, to protect members of Congress, and do the basic job at its most needed time. Now, in the case of that, I just want to remind people, the last time the Capitol was stormed was the War of 1812. So if we're not going to have any standards, well, then I guess we're out. You have to at least say at some point you can't storm the Capitol.
I completely agree. And I actually read the January 6th report. I watched all the stuff. And what he did there, he sat for 187 minutes eating a cheeseburger in the White House while they were burning down the Capitol. And that was kind of the tipping point, which got him in so much trouble. But the political reality is there are people that think the system has been rigged forever and that Trump represents their grievances. Those are his supporters. But on the other side, the Democrats are not presenting an alternative. Joe Biden, to a lot of people, 50% of the country right now, is just not an alternative. He's too old. He's not talking about inflation. And the border, he's finally doing something on the border, but the border's out of control. So every second that either side's talking about this trial, in my opinion, as a political analyst, both sides are losing and the country loses. There's a lot of bad stuff going on right now.
Yeah, and for Trump to whine about how poorly he's being treated and for Biden to continue to talk about what a bad guy Trump is both malpractice. By both candidates.
Well,
it's ridiculous.
And Biden only did the border thing now because of the election.
Well, exactly. But, and Trump killed the border deal that they had, which was a better deal than he would have gotten because of the election. The reality, I think everybody's fed up with it.
This is like getting on Facebook or YouTube and you're going down a rabbit hole and suddenly it's 3 hours later and you're less smart than when you started. So if you listen to Pat, at least you'll have some understanding of this. When we come back, I got more for you. I'll give you 11 names. Ready? Alan Weisselberg, Roger Stone, George Papadopoulos, George Nader, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, Michael Flynn, Michael Cohen, Elliot Brody, Tom Barrack, and Steve Bannon. What do they all have in common? They're all Trump associates who've been charged with crimes.
I say, that's just
Many of whom have been
That's a
pardoned.
long list.
Does that matter?
Does it matter? Probably in the big scheme of things, no. Other than really Obama administration, there were always people, even in Reagan, the attorney general that's speaking on behalf of Trump down in Florida actually had to resign in a scandal. So
there's people that power makes you ultimately corrupt. That's the old quote.
Yeah.
But not to this level. The numbers are big. I just don't think that it's connecting with people.
No, and it kind of quit connecting. Starting with Clinton, when you got a guy that fools around with an intern in the Oval Office,
who should have been thrown out of his job,
gets in House articles of impeachment, and he goes out with a 58% approval rating. So people just, I think the politicians need to wake up. Nobody cares.
Right.
So, but that's what. I mean, there are many problems, but that's one of them. That people just the New York case appeared to everybody to be a sex scandal, and no one's cared about that since they've ever cared about it.
Don't people care about economy and
You'd think,
how
yeah.
we're going to survive and your personal life and how it all affects you?
Well, that's the disservice of both sides, not talking about inflation or immigration or what's going.
Exactly.
We have aircraft carriers going into the South China Sea right now. Right. There's bad things going on.
Yeah.
But if you engage in criminal or seemingly criminal behavior, you set yourself up for problems when people can use that against you, which is why you're supposed to be held to a higher standard when you're in elected office anywhere, certainly in Congress and in the White House. I don't know that the public connects with it anymore, and I agree with you. I think it largely started with Clinton. Clinton should have lost his job.
Yeah,
Clinton should have absolutely been thrown out.
I think,
but you can't go backwards. It's like taking statues down. You can't go backwards and rewrite history. What you can deal with is what's in front of you right now.
I agree. The fundamental unfairness. There's two great examples of it right now. The New York Trump case. That's the first case. They do. Alvin Bragg, the DA, said, "Yeah, we do bring these cases." I go, "No, you don't. They've only brought one case involving campaign finance law like this in the history of that in the last 20 years." So Trump should not have been. But for being Donald Trump, he would have been charged. Hunter Biden's on trial now. He's going to be convicted on this gun charge. If his name weren't Hunter Biden, that plea deal would have been accepted. He would have paid his taxes back, and this would have been done. He's in the same boat.
Because his name's Hunter Biden.
Yeah, and both those people, or both those elements of the justice system, now nobody believes in the justice system, and that's an important part of our country.
It continues to break down. Well, speaking
and
of
they
that.
Said, President Biden said he wouldn't pardon his son if he was convicted.
Yeah, I said it yesterday. He said
if you go back and look at what the pardon...
He wouldn't, right?
He would not.
Would not. But the pardon provision, that the powers that the president has, goes back to the Civil War. It wasn't intended as a get-out-of-jail free pass for your buddies.
Exactly.
Now, that being said, George H.W. Bush pardoned his buddies in the scandal back then. So there's a lot of things that make...
And he was a great president.
A great president. But I understand people's frustration, which thinking everything is rigged, because on the face of it, sometimes it appears it's rigged, and that's really dangerous.
But see, part of the problem, the highest part of politics, is those that make the rules change the rules, and they have no incentive to change the rules, which is why you have to show up to vote them out. But you can't vote out the Supreme Court. Yesterday, a report came out. Clarence Thomas has raked in over $5 million in cash and prizes in his time on the court. There still is no ethics code the court has to subscribe to. A lot of people are leaning on Durbin, say Durbin should start another special committee. Special committee is like a blue ribbon committee in Illinois. It means nothing anymore.
Right.
Senator Durbin's been all over this. I did not know this until recently, and I've had my law license for 35 years, that the Supreme Court has no code of ethics.
Right. And is it up to John Roberts to say that has to change, or could he change it if he wanted to?
I think he could, but I think you'd have to get unanimous or at least a majority of the justices. But Clarence Thomas, that's...
He's treated like Wheel of Fortune.
I know. And his wife, actually, during the insurrection, was playing footsie with Trump's chief of staff. They were sending smoke signals on what to do. I mean, the Supreme Court's going to make some huge rulings on the power of the presidency and other things in this session. And, man, if you don't believe what they do is above board. I remember in 2000, everybody thought the court was rigged because of the Gore-Bush decision, which I don't really think it was. But again, another institution that's been undercut by the political process, and it's just we're going in the wrong direction.
Is it safe to say that things actually have never changed? So all of this corruption and all of these things that we worry about in all these different areas of politics or of life, It hasn't changed, but we just know more now because people talk more. Maybe it's always been this
worse
way.
now. It's worse now, but we do know more as well.
We do know more, but I think the difference is now the tactic when you got in trouble back in the day was not to attack the system. Trump perfected that. Attack the FBI, attack the judicial system, attack the media, attack the institutions that we rely upon, attack whatever. Anybody that goes against him.
Well, and that's what Gold Bar Bob Menendez is doing. Gold Bar Bob Menendez is not my fault. It's my wife's fault. It's the Republicans' fault.
I know, blaming your wife. That's a unique theory. Yeah, but it is. There is too much information, but there's also this trend of going after institutions. I've never. It's just never
bad.
Really seen.
It's very, very bad.
Even Bill Clinton didn't do that when he never went after the prosecutor. In fact, they just at the end when he left, they settled that case because they were still investigating him when he left.
The Trump, you and I disagree on this. I think this is the most vice presidential important election ever because of the age and the relative infirmity of both candidates. Biden first, and Trump is certainly not healthy. And they're old. They're old. They're of an age on an insurance, table that they could die tomorrow.
Yes.
So one of the great historical mysteries is why the Biden people have done nothing to elevate Kamala Harris to at least make it appear she could do the job if needed in the last 4 years. So there's no confidence in her. Trump has got a short list now that he seems to agree with, though he could change at a moment's notice. J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Tim Scott, Tom Cotton, Byron Donalds, Elise Stefanik, and Doug Burgum are all on it. Does he pick from one of those, or is it somebody else?
Just what I can read from the news accounts. I don't have insider information. This vetting process requires all those people to turn over information, and those have been people that have been asked to turn over information. So I suspect that list is limited to that. Now, remember in 2008, Sarah Palin came out of nowhere. And they made that pick, which ended up being a mistake because they didn't have the vet on her they should have. It should have been Tim Pawlenty from Minnesota. So, but I would guess that those are the folks because they're the ones that are being vetted.
If I had to put you to make a pick, who's it going to be?
Pick two. Just give us a two.
God, the one that seems to be the biggest, probably J.D. Vance.
Mm-hmm.
I think J.D. Vance because he'll do what Trump wants.
Exactly.
I think Burgum is more of a Mike Pence type. He's smarter than Mike Pence, but he'll do what Trump wants. I think Rubio and Cotton are too much of a personality. Trump doesn't want to be showing up ever.
Cotton's kind of an American hero. He enlisted in 2001. I think he's got a law degree. I met him right when he was running for Congress, and he seemed like more of a patriot than a guy that's going to take orders. So I would guess, as good as he would be someday being president, I don't think he wants to take orders.
And Tim Scott's not on your top of your list?
It could be because there's nobody that would be more subservient to Trump. Now, if he's doing that just to that's a state that he's going to win anyway, South Carolina, if he wants to do it just to attract African-American votes.
Tim Scott's not going to bring the black vote.
He's not going to bring the black vote.
Tim Scott's barely black.
Yeah, I still think that that Biden could save his entire reputation and his presidency in a historical context if he gets up at the convention and says, give a great magnanimous speech and say, hey, I was a caretaker. I kept the country from Trump, but I'm not running.
Only if Kamala Harris steps down with him.
Well,
she could run for governor.
He's going to say that then he says, I'm not running, and then somebody else walks up.
Yeah, well, I don't. They'd have to have
to the convention.
Then they have to pick the person.
But I think they're going to nominate him before the convention. But the savior to that is Kamala Harris could run for governor of California. But that's a mess right now.
But see, that's why it's good that the convention is here because JD doesn't have to keep the plane running. So if Biden does make that choice, it's just hop in a car and we'll drive over.
He is our governor is a very influential national Democrat now, for sure.
Sure. And by the way, to give him credit, it's not just for the checkbook.
But you got to give him credit for the Democratic agenda. He's gotten pretty much everything through that he wanted through, from green energy to criminal justice
shoved
reform.
it down our throats, whether we like it or not.
Well, that's the Republicans' fault. Yeah, you got to have and this is where people like to scream and yell at elements of the Republican Party. But if you want it different, you got to get out and vote differently. And the party needs to step it up and put some candidates up north of I-80 that can actually win. And you can't be on the Trump train in a state like Illinois where Trump lost by 1 million votes twice.
The last great director of the Republican Party in Illinois was a guy named Pat Brady.
I don't think many people think that. But it is. We need. I was walking down the street one day and I barely know him, but I ran into David Axelrod and he goes, "You know what?" And he told me, he goes, "We need two parties in this state. This is the guy that got Obama elected, and I think we do need two parties." So
You sure he wasn't just trying to get you to buy him a sandwich at Manny's?
No, I think he was trying to get away from me, but I didn't.
Like most.
Yeah, like most people when I walk down the street.
Pat Brady, it's your daughter's birthday this weekend.
Thank you. Baby Grace is 23 years old, and she's in town, and we're going for a plane ride Saturday night. We're going to take friends of mine are going to take us up in the Beach 18. We're going to fly down the shoreline at sunset. So if you see
how cool is that?
an old-looking
wave.
airplane flying down the lake shore at sunset Saturday night, that's
What
us.
a good dad.
Happy
what a good daughter.
birthday.
And Grace, I'm not bitter at all that you couldn't get your butt out of bed and come see me.
No, my house smelled like stale beer this morning.
Well, that was you.
Yeah, that was you, right?
you.
That wasn't Grace.
Thank you, Pat Brady.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Nick DiGilio's coming in next after this news on the Big 89 WLS.
A couple of officers injured after an accident yesterday involving 3 vehicles. News is next. First, the WLS Weather Channel forecast.
Dry and windy on this Friday with sunshine and gusts out of the northwest near 30 to 35 miles per hour. The high should hit 75. Overnight, partly cloudy with a low of 61. Turning cloudy tomorrow with a few scattered showers and thunderstorms at a high of 73. Then a sunny and warmer Sunday with a high to 79. Right now, 60 at O'Hare, 62 degrees at Midway, 63 along the lake. From the Weather Channel, I'm Jeff Maher, WLS AM 890, with another update in 30 minutes.
And a crash involving CPD officers last night left some people injured. This happened just around 7:15, 63rd and Racine in the Inglewood neighborhood. A marked squad car struck a unmarked squad car and then struck a Cadillac. The fire department says one of the officers was taken to UFC in serious condition. The other 4 officers taken to Holy Cross. A civilian who was a pedestrian there was injured. She was taken to the UFC in fair condition. The driver of the Cadillac refused medical treatment. An investigation underway after an iron worker died and another injured at a Southside construction site. This is at the University of Chicago Medical Center in Hyde Park. Scaffolding collapsed. A worker in his 20s was killed, later identified as 27-year-old David O'Donnell of Oak Forest. They believe that high winds caused the collapse of the equipment there, the scaffolding. OSHA is now investigating. 4 Russian ships, including a sub, will arrive in Havana next week, according to Cuban officials, citing historically friendly relations between both nations. As the tensions escalate over Western military support for Ukraine in its war with Russia, Cuba's foreign ministry saying in a news release that the ships will be in Havana between July 12th and June 12th and June 17th, noting that none of them will carry any nuclear weapons and assuring that their presence, quote, does not represent a threat to the region. WLS News Time 7:35. On the roads right now, we're moving. Not too bad for Friday. 45 minutes on the Kennedy. O'Hare to downtown. Ike Thorndale to the post office 54. Stevenson 355 to the drive 42. Dan Ryan 95th to downtown just 22 minutes. Next update 15 minutes.